The full-blown economic collapse that is happening in Venezuela right now is a preview of what Americans will be experiencing in the not-too-distant future. Just a few years ago, most Venezuelans could never have imagined that food shortages would become so severe that people would literally hunt dogs and cats for food. But as you will see below, this is now taking place. Sadly, this is what the endgame of socialism looks like. When an all-powerful government is elevated far above all other institutions in society and radical leftists are given the keys to the kingdom, this is the result. Food shortages, looting and rampant violent crime have all become part of daily life in Venezuela, and we all need to watch as this unfolds very carefully, because similar scenarios will soon be playing out all over the planet. The funny thing is that Venezuela actually has more wealth than most countries in the world. According to the CIA, Venezuela actually has more proven oil reserves than anyone else on the globe, including Saudi Arabia. So how did such a wealthy nation find itself plunged into full-blown economic collapse so rapidly, and could a similar thing happen to us? The president of Venezuela has declared a 60-day state of emergency in a desperate attempt to restore order, but most people don't anticipate that it will do much good. Social order continues to unravel as the economy systematically implodes. The Venezuelan economy shrunk by 5.7% last year, and it is being projected that it will contract by another 8% in 2016. Meanwhile, inflation is raging wildly out of control. According to the IMF, the official inflation rate in Venezuela will be somewhere around 720% this year and 2,200% next year. If people are able to get their hands on some money, they immediately rush out to the stores to use it before the prices go up again. This has created devastating shortages of food, basic supplies, and medicine. Electricity is also in short supply, and a 2-day workweek has been imposed on many government employees in a desperate attempt to save power. Violent crime is seemingly everywhere, and most law-abiding Venezuelans lock themselves in their homes at night as a result. Crowds of people in Venezuela have stolen flour, chicken, and even underwear this week as looting increases across the country in the wake of shortages of many basic products. Many people have adopted the habit of getting up in the dead of night to spend hours in long lines in front of supermarkets. But as more end up empty-handed and black market prices soar, plundering is rising in Venezuela, an OPEC nation that was already one of the world's most violent countries. There is no official data, but the Venezuelan Observatory for Social Conflict, a rights group, have reported 107 episodes of looting or attempted looting in the first quarter of 2016. Videos of crowds breaking into shops, swarming onto trucks or fighting over products frequently make the rounds on social media, though footage is often hard to confirm. One example of this looting took place on May 11. Thousands of hungry people stormed Maracay wholesale market in central Venezuela, and the police seemed powerless to stop them. They took milk, pasta, flour, oil, and milk powder. There were 5,000 people, one witness told Venezuela outlet El Estimulo. It is important to remember that this was not an isolated incident. As people have become hungrier and hungrier, there have been reports of looting at pharmacies, shopping malls, supermarkets, and food delivery trucks. During some of these episodes there have actually been people chanting "We are hungry." Other Venezuelans have resorted to digging in dumpsters and trash cans for food. This may seem detestable to many Americans, but when you are desperately hungry you may be surprised at what you are willing to do. And as I mentioned above, some Venezuelans are now actually hunting dogs and cats for food. Ramon Muchacho, mayor of Chaco in Caracas, said the streets of the capital of Venezuela are filled with people killing animals for food. Through Twitter, Muchacho reported that in Venezuela, it is a painful reality that people hunt cats, dogs, and pigeons to ease their hunger. By morning, 3 newborns were already dead. The day had begun with the usual hazards, chronic shortages of antibiotics, intravenous solutions, even food. Then a blackout swept over the city, shutting down the respirators in the maternity ward. Doctors kept ailing infants alive by pumping air into their lungs by hand for hours. By nightfall, 4 more newborns had died. Are not the same things happening here? The US government is mismanaging our money too. During Barack Obama's 8 years in the White House, the US national debt has risen by more than $8 trillion. We waste money in some of the most bizarre ways imaginable, and at this point our national debt is nearly the double the size it was just prior to the last major financial crisis. Institutional destruction. With each passing day, our society resembles the republic that our founders originally intended less and less, and it resembles socialist dictatorships more and more. We may as well not even have a constitution anymore, because at this point nobody really follows it. The third thing that Business Insider mentioned, nonsense policy making, is a perfect description of what has been going on in Washington, D.C. these days. Perhaps that is why Congress only has a 12.8% approval rating right now. Lastly, thievery and corruption are also out of control in our nation too. The elite and special interest groups spend massive amounts of money to get their favorites into office, and in turn those politicians shower their good friends with money and favors. It is a very sick relationship, but that is how our system now works. We are sitting on the largest mountain of debt in the history of the planet, and our debt-fueled prosperity is completely dependent on the rest of the world lending us gigantic amounts of money at ridiculously low interest rates and continuing to use our increasingly shaky currency, which we are debasing at a staggering pace. We consume far more than we produce, and unlike Venezuela, we aren't sitting on hundreds of billions of barrels of oil. The amount of real wealth that we actually have does not justify our current standard of living. The only way that we are able to live the way that we do is by stealing consumption from the future. One study has found that our debt level is the highest that it has been since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and yet we continue to race down this road to economic oblivion without even thinking twice about it. Venezuela's economy is in a deep crisis. Its president, Nicolas Maduro, declared a state of economic emergency for 60 days on Friday. Maduro's government stopped publishing any economic data about the country in 2014, other than updates on its shrinking gold and cash reserves. But that changed Friday when Venezuela finally published years of economic data. And it was ugly. Venezuela's economy shrank 7.1% in the third quarter of last year, according to the government. It's been shrinking for 7 consecutive quarters going back to the start of 2014. Inflation in Venezuela skyrocketed 141% over the year ending in September, the central bank reported. Incredibly, some experts believe even that figure is understating the problem. The IMF projects inflation in Venezuela will increase 204% this year. The country is in economic meltdown, says Edward Glossop, emerging markets economist at Capital Economics, a research firm. The figures are predictably horrific. Here are 5 reasons why Venezuela continues to be an economic mess. 1. Oil crash hurts Venezuela the most. Venezuela's economy depends mostly on oil. That was great when a barrel of oil was worth $100 a barrel in 2013 and 2014. Now oil prices have fallen to as low as $28.36, the lowest point in 12 years. As long as oil prices stay historically low, Venezuela will struggle to grow. Barclays economist Alejandro Ariza calls Venezuela the biggest loser in Latin America from the oil price crash. He predicted Venezuela's exports will total a mere $27 billion in 2016, down dramatically from $75 billion 2 years before. 2. A currency worth less than a penny. Venezuela's currency, the bolivar, has plummeted at a breathtaking pace. A year ago, $1 equaled 175 bolivars. Now a dollar is worth 865 bolivars. Put another way, 1 bolivar is worth $0.0011 less than a penny, according to the unofficial exchange rate. Most Venezuelans exchange bolivars and dollars at the unofficial rate because Maduro's regime has created a confusing system that involves 3 official exchange rates, 2 for different types of imports and 1 for ordinary Venezuelans. The 2 primary rates deeply overvalue the bolivar, creating high demand for dollars. 3. New power struggle dooms 2016. Some Venezuelans have had enough of Maduro. In January, the opposition party, Democratic Unity, took 109 seats in Congress, far more than the 55 seats Maduro's Socialist Party won. The opposition now controls 65% of Congress. That's important. That level allows Democratic Unity to fire Maduro's cabinet members and pass reforms that Maduro can't overturn. Of course, it's not that easy. Maduro appointed new Supreme Court justices right before the new Congress took office. They could overturn the opposition's legislation, creating government gridlock. In any case, political instability is never good for an economy, and it's on the rise this year. 4. Default in 2016 is difficult to avoid. Venezuela has been teetering on the brink of default the past 2 months. The country is barely making enough money on oil exports to cover its debt payments. This year Venezuela owes over $10 billion in debt payments. Nearly half of that is due in October and November. I'm 99% sure they're going to default this year, says Russ Dowlin, managing partner at Latinvest, a Miami-based firm that invests in Venezuela. Barclays Ariza mostly agrees, saying that a Venezuelan default in 2016 is difficult to avoid. The only thing preventing a default is if oil prices rise soon or one of its few allies, China, Russia, or Iran, bail out the government. Both of those appear unlikely for now. 5. Food crisis. Venezuelans are bearing the brunt of the economy's problems. The government can't pay to import basic food items like milk, flour, and eggs, leaving many supermarkets with empty shelves. A year ago, McDonald's, McD, in Venezuela temporarily ran out of French fries. Food shortages along with lines lasting several hours in hot weather are a major source of the social unrest in the country. There are no eggs, there's no milk, says Dowlin, who frequently travels to Venezuela. It's getting worse. Right now is a preview of what Americans will be experiencing in the not-too-distant future. Just a few years ago, most Venezuelans could never have imagined that food shortages would become so severe that people would literally hunt dogs and cats for food. But as you will see below, this is now taking place. Sadly, watch as this unfolds very carefully, because similar scenarios will soon be playing out all over the planet. The funny thing is that Venezuela actually has more wealth than most countries in the world. According to the CIA, Venezuela actually has more proven oil reserves than anyone else on the globe, including Saudi Arabia. This is what the endgame of socialism looks like. When an all-powerful government is elevated far above all other institutions in society and radical leftists are given the keys to the kingdom, this is the result. Food shortages, looting and rampant violent crime have all become part of daily life in Venezuela, and we all need to the full-blown economic collapse that is happening in Venezuela. So how did such a wealthy nation find itself plunged into full-blown economic collapse so rapidly, and could a similar thing happen to us? The president of Venezuela has declared a 60-day state of emergency in a desperate attempt to restore order, but most people don't anticipate that it will do much good.